Hello everyone, so today I'm going to be talking about this film, which is Bonnie and Clyde. So Bonnie and Clyde came out in 1967 and it was directed by Arthur Penn, and it stars Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway as Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. Now for those of you who haven't heard of Bonnie and Clyde were outlaws in America in the early 1930s, and well, they robbed banks and they killed people basically, and this film is about these two guys. Now while this isn't the most historically accurate film in terms of Bonnie and Clyde's lives, it does include a lot of aspects that did happen in real life, and it makes for a very entertaining film. Now I'll start off by saying that this is actually a very violent film, and it was very violent for its time. In fact, when it came out they called it the bloodiest ending in all of cinema, because the scene at the end is actually extremely bloody. Now throughout this film we see when characters die they really do bleed, and that there is always lots of blood, and this is actually one of the first Hollywood films to use squibs, which are little explosive packets which are put to actors which explode when they're supposed to have been shot, so that blood comes out and so that the audience, we can actually see the effect of these characters being shot. Now this film also has a brilliant supporting cast as well. So we get, there's a character called C.W. Moss in this who joins the gang a bit later, and he's played by Michael J. Pollard. And Michael J. Pollard actually gives a very good performance in the film. He doesn't necessarily say as much as the other actors, but everything to do with his facial expressions and his body language, it's all absolutely perfect, and he makes a great addition to this film. We also get Gene Hackman. He plays Buck Barrow, which is Clyde Barrow's brother, and he's also very good. And we get Estelle Parsons play Buck's wife Blanche, and Estelle Parsons actually won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in this film, and I can see why, because she certainly has a big impact in this film. During the start we see her scream quite a lot. She really doesn't like what's going on with all the crime, but she sort of has to put up with it in lots of ways throughout the film. We also do get an early appearance from Gene Wilder in this film, and Gene Wilder plays a character called Eugene who's been taken hostage by Bonnie and Clyde. Really, he only appears on screen for about 15 minutes or something like that, so he doesn't have a big part at all, but his appearance is very funny. So this film is often thought to be one of the films in the new Hollywood era of films in the late 60s. So in 1967, the year this film came out, we also had another film called The Graduate, and The Graduate, along with this, were films which appealed to the younger demographic at the time, who were part of the counterculture movement or the hippie movement that was going on in the late 60s. Films like this, they helped push the boundaries of other Hollywood films in terms of violence and sex and things that they could show on screen. Because before this, they wouldn't ever make a film as violent as this. In fact, this film was pretty controversial at its time for its depiction of violence. It really didn't hold back in terms of showing how violent things could be, especially in the scenes with all the shootouts. And the first scene in this film where a character dies was actually quite shocking. When I saw it, it was really just seems to come out of nowhere. It's when they're robbing a bank and they shoot someone, and the character gets shot right in the eye, and there's blood everywhere, and it really makes a mark on the film. And when you're watching it, you realise, wow, this is really serious what these guys are doing. This film does also have a few comedic elements to it as well, although obviously it's a crime gangster film, so it is a serious film in its tone, but it does have a few funny bits throughout the film. The interaction between Warren Beatty and Gene Hackman is generally quite funny, and we get a few scenes when Bonnie and Clyde are robbing a bank, and the first few times they do it, they don't speak loud enough when they walk into the bank and nobody hears them. During the first time that they escape from the bank after robbing it and they're trying to drive off, C.W. Moss, who's driving a car, he has to go forward and then reverse again because he's stuck between two cars because of parallel parking and he can't get out. And it's one of those things which is sort of funny but also pretty horrible at the same time, because what's going on is not nice, but when they add these little bits of comedy to it, it really makes it interesting. We get quite a few scenes where Bonnie and Clyde are driving away from the cops in their car, and there will be some light-hearted banjo music playing. So it's almost as if as if as the audience were meant to be laughing at these scenes with how silly it is with these 1930s cars sort of driving across the grass and the gravel and away from the cops and across all these fields and things like that. So as I mentioned earlier, this film came out at the height of the counterculture movement in the late 60s, and it was almost a metaphor for what was going on at the time, because the late 60s in America was times of the Vietnam War when lots of Americans had lost faith in the government, and obviously Bonnie and Clyde in this film are very rebellious and very anti-establishment characters, and we see them robbing banks and things like that. And obviously this film is set in the Depression, where lots of people were kicked off their land by the government and had lost faith in the government and banks in general. So you could also say that Bonnie and Clyde are fairly sympathetic, likeable characters, although they are actually petty criminals as well. These are guys who are generally quite likeable characters, although obviously at the time when they made this film they did have to show the characters being punished in the end, because every time we have criminals or bad characters in films had to show them as being punished, so they couldn't suddenly just get away with everything after they've done lots of evil deeds. So I think this is a fantastic gangster film. Generally, most of the old gangster films came out in the 1930s, and this film was almost seen as a tribute to those older films. But I think as a gangster film, this is very good. It is obviously very violent, so I can't necessarily recommend it to everyone exactly, but you have to remember that at the time this came out, it was very unusual that a film was this violent. Nothing had been done like this before in Hollywood. But in terms of what I don't like about this film, really, there's not very much. I mean, I suppose sometimes the violence is a little bit overdone, a little bit in your face, but this was a new sort of experimental time for Hollywood when they were trying new things. So overall, I'm going to give Bonnie and Clyde a rating of 8 out of 10. I think it's a fantastic gangster film, definitely worth checking out. Not the best gangster film by any means. I don't think it's as good as lots of the older ones from the 1930s, which it is a tribute to, but I still think it's a very revolutionary film, very much a film of its time, and it broke many taboos. So I think it is definitely worth a watch if you get time. So there we go. So that is Bonnie and Clyde. So what do you guys think? Have you seen Bonnie and Clyde? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Please let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on Bonnie and Clyde. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.